Hi, welcome to another live event. Today I wanted to do something a little different and I want to do some live coding. And in this case, to convert some Gradle files from Groovy to Kotlin DSL. I don't know if you know about it, but from the latest versions of Gradle, you can write your Groovy files using Kotlin DSL, which is a small variation of Kotlin that allows to write DSLs. So today, what we are going to do is to convert this simple app. This is the app I use for my online course, for my online training. We are converting the Gradle files from Groovy to Kotlin DSL. And to do that, we are going to follow some simple steps that you can see now in the screen, because to be honest, it's not really easy to convert those files. We have to follow the steps pretty carefully because the IDE is not helping much. So what I want to do with this live coding is to show you how to do it in the easiest possible way. It's possible that the Gradle compile times are not very fast because I'm recording at the same time, streaming and compiling the code. So I'm sorry for that, but if you are watching it now, you will have to wait. And otherwise, if you are watching the recording, you can maybe watch it in 2x or whatever to try to go faster. In any case, I'll try to do as many little Gradle builds as possible, but to be honest, it's the only way to check that everything is going smoothly, so I will have to do it from time to time. Another thing I was going to mention is that I'm going to compile the project using the terminal, because otherwise using the IDE is not very helpful. The errors are not very self-explanatory, so I prefer to use the terminal, and I will be doing a simple assemble debug to check that everything is going correctly. Right now it's compiling and we have our Gradle files. They are very simple. We have here the main Gradle with the Kotlin support and the Android plugin. That's all a regular configuration for a normal project in Android. And then here we have the plugins that we are using: Kotlin Android extensions, KAPT, and the regular Android configuration with some dependencies. What we are going to do is to convert all these to Kotlin DSL. And to do that, the first step we are going to do, well, the first two steps are focused in leaving the files as similar as possible to the ones that are supported by Kotlin, so that the conversion is the least possible painful. And to do that, we have to take into account that when we assign a value to a variable in Groovy or call to a function, we can hide the equals and the parentheses. So that's why in Groovy we have all these simple calls that are not representing any direct assignment or any function call. We cannot see it here, but it's happening under the hood. To support this in Kotlin, what we have to do is to do explicit assignments or explicit function calls. And we need to do that part. The other part that is different from Groovy and Kotlin is that in Groovy we can use both simple apostrophes or double in an indistinctive way. We can use one or the other, but in the case of Kotlin we have to use this one. So we are going to start with that because it's the simplest thing to do. And let's start, for instance, from the settings.gradle, which is the simplest one. What we have to do is substitute these symbols with the double ones. And to do that, we could do it manually, but we're going to replace, because we'll use this later. So Command replace, Command R, and let's replace all this. Replace all. This code is still valid in a Groovy script, so it will keep compiling. I'm going to change everything and hit compile again so that we can check that everything is working smoothly. If we get back to the source, to the project build script, I'm going to do the same. Hit replace and use the double ones. Replace all, and that's it. And the same for the app module. Replace and replace all. The goal here is to change everything that is possible now before start using Kotlin Gradle scripts, and that way we'll have the minimum number of errors when we compile from the Kotlin DSL scripts. So if we run this now, it may take some time, as I mentioned, because my computer is now doing too many things, but the changes are little, so I hope it won't be too much. Okay, perfect. We've done the first step and everything is working for now. Let's go with the second step, which is to substitute spaces with equals and parentheses. What's the rule of thumb here? Let's use equals everywhere, and when we have to call a function, it will show an error, so it will help us decide whether it's one or the other. We can again start here and do include equals up. In this case, I'm not sure that this is showing an error, but here's a warning saying that this assignment is not used anymore, so looks like it's not a good one. So let's do it as a function call. I can ensure that this is a function and not an assignment, so let's leave it like this, and you see that this is not complaining anymore. If we go to the project one, this is using assignment, regular assignment, so all good. And the first one that we see different is this, the class path. We can write equals here and equals here too, and see what happens if it doesn't show an error, because this is going a little slow. Let's try with sync to see what happens. Yeah, we'll see that there's an error here because there's an unknown property class path. This is not a property, it's a function, so let's change it to here and here. And let's compile again to see that this file is working still as expected. It's at least compiling. Let's wait some seconds. And great, this is still working. So let's move to this one, which is a bit longer. I'm going to make it a little bigger. And we have many different ones here. Compile SDK version, application ID, min SDK version, etc. So let's do it as before. Let's put equals on everything and let's see what happens. Equals, equals, and equals. And the same here, equals. Let's do this part first and we'll continue with the next one later. Here it is already showing errors, so we know that we have taken the wrong one here. Let's use functions, and the same here. And let's try to compile. There's one that doesn't complain here and will when we move it to Kotlin DSL, but I'm leaving like this for now, so that you can see how would you do it in a regular sample and how to fix it, how to find out that error later. But for now, everything seems to be working, so let's continue. Here in the release part, we have a minify enabled that can equals to false, and this one we already can predict or that what is going to happen, because we have a comma here separating a couple of arguments, so this is clearly a function. I'm not going to do the assignment because it's clear that this is a function. And for the implementations, let's try with the first one and see what happens. And let's compile. This failed, so let's see why. It says here that the implementation is an unknown property, so this is again a function and not a property. I'm doing it for all the dependencies here. In fact, we could have predicted because of this one that is excluding a group. Let's do it like this. And the same for the closing parentheses. Here. As you can see, this is a bit tedious. It's not exactly straightforward, but at least with these steps, it will be easier for you to do the migration. Okay, let's see that happens so far. We see it here compiling. Okay. Awesome. So everything is going good. As you can see here, we are doing the same. We are doing an assignment instead of calling a function or doing an assignment. We are using the less explicit way of calling. This is again a function because, as you can see, we are passing here a couple of arguments to that function. This is the way to do named arguments in Groovy. It's a little bit different than Kotlin. In Kotlin we use an equals, and here we use a colon. So we can cover this with the parentheses, and this you have to rely on me to make it similar to how it would be in in Kotlin DSL. We just need to close here the call of the function and leave this as a block of code. This one wouldn't be necessary anymore. And let's check that this is working. It's a different way to write the same in Groovy, but this will be much more similar to what we need in Kotlin DSL, so let's make it simple for the future. Nice. So once we've done that, our next step would be to add the KTS extension. But before doing this, I'm going to change something so that we can compile sooner. Well, let's change it first so that you can see what is failing. So this is just a simple rename. I'm going to rename this settings Gradle. We just need to add KTS as an extension so that Gradle can detect that these are Kotlin Gradle scripts and not Groovy scripts. So let's refactor this, continue, same for this one, KTS, let's do the refactor even if it complains, KTS, refactor. Awesome, so now Android Studio already detected that these are Kotlin Gradle scripts instead of Groovy scripts, and the next step that we have to do is to make this compile. To do that, I'm changing a couple of things. We can try compiling, try syncing and see what happens. But one of the things that is no longer supported in Kotlin DSL is this way to declare variables. So we will need a very different way to make this, as you see later. But for now, what we are going to do is to remove this, so that we only have one error, one compile error that we can fix and compile again. Because otherwise, if you have to fix all the errors in a row, it's going to be much more difficult to detect what's happening. So this is still compiling, it will take some time. What I found when using Kotlin DSL instead of Groovy is that the compile times, at least the first time, are a bit smaller, a bit longer, sorry. Also that the changes in the build scripts are slower too, because it looks like the IDE have to think a lot to give you recommendations. That, on the other hand, is a good way, a good thing for Kotlin DSL. Kotlin DSL, as Kotlin is a static typed language as opposed to Groovy, the compiler is able to understand, to detect the possible the possible options that you have, and the intelligence works much better than with Groovy, that it will show you almost everything or random stuff. Here is much more precise and will help you detect errors easier than with Groovy. But okay, as you see here, this is saying us already that this ext is now recognized. So what I'm doing here is to remove this. We'll put it back later. Here using 1321, I think it is. And the same in the module. Here 2800, 2800, and 1321. With this, we are removing some of the errors, the compile errors. I don't know if we can see all here. Yeah, the unresolved reference. Okay, another thing that is not compiling, as you can see now, is this. So for now, I'm commenting out this. Let's wait a little. Okay, apply dependencies. And let's see. Good. So the next step is another thing that is really different from Kotlin DSL, so from Groovy to Kotlin DSL, which is Oh, I forgot one step before, which is this one. As you see, this is not working anymore. We could change it to the function call, but instead we are using the new way to implement the plugins, which is a little simpler. We will do here plugins ID, and here we use the Android application, and we have an extension function here called Kotlin that will allow us to identify Kotlin plugins very easily, like this. Then Kotlin Android extensions, and the last one Kotlin KPT. This should make it work now. And the other thing we need to change, this is the problem and why I mentioned that it's better to use the terminal, because right now everything is not compiling, so the ID is not very helpful. But if we go here to the terminal, we can compile and we'll see the errors in a simpler way. As I was mentioning, the other big difference is how to call the build types. Instead of having like blocks of code that allow us to identify the different build types, we have to do it in my opinion, in a little more rudimentary way. Instead of being able to call release directly, we have to do get by name and the name of the build type, release. So you have to use strings here, which is a little less cleaner, but anyway. While this compiles, as I know that some other things are going to fail, what I'm going to do is to continue fixing them. Let's wait a little more just in case it finishes soon. That doesn't look like it. So let's continue. Another difference between Kotlin DSL and Gradle is that instead of this being called minify enabled, this property is called is minify enabled. So we need to change this so that it compiles. And let's stop here for now. Let's wait until this finishes compiling. This is what I mentioned, that first times you compile, this is a little slow, but apart from that, my computer is about to burst because I'm doing so many things, so it will take more time than expected, than usual. Let's wait a little. In fact, right now we are really close to having the end result. We have already modified all this. This is the other error I mentioned that we can fix now. In Groovy, the named arguments are specified with colon. Here in Kotlin, as you may know, we use equals. So we can change this already. And avoid another error. Here there are some of the errors that we already fixed, like this one, the release one, that as we mentioned, we need to use the new function getByName and pass the build type that we are going to recover. The minify enabled is here too, we already fixed that. And this is the one I mentioned that it was working in Groovy but not in Kotlin DSL. This is in fact a function maybe in Groovy for some reason it's a property instead of a function, but here we have to convert the compile SDK to a function. And the exclude that we already fixed that one, all looks solved right now. So let's run, let's compile. And let's see if we can already compile this code using Kotlin DSL. As you may see, the Kotlin DSL is a little more tedious to write in a way, because we have to know beforehand whether something is a function or is a property in order to decide whether we write an equals or parentheses. I guess this is something that it will fix in the future and convert everything to functions or to properties, but right now you need to try and see what happens, because there's no other way. When Kotlin DSL, when this is compiling, as we are using Kotlin, we can autocomplete, so it will be simpler. But right now that this is not helping us in any ways, we have to do it just by trying one by one. And yeah, as I mentioned, the compile times at the beginning are pretty slow. So in the meanwhile, I'm going to explain you how we are going to do the variables that you may remember we had here. I'm going to show the changes we did. No, not this one, the other one here. Oh, I don't see it here. Oh, this one is. Here we were using these variables to identify the versions that we were using, but this is not possible anymore in Kotlin, at least in the same way as Groovy did it. So we have to find an alternative. The most approximate way to do it to this one is really tedious and really convoluted, so in the real practice it's very difficult to use, but there's another way that makes it much simpler. So the way is to use build source. The build source, I'm changing this to the project view, which is easier to me to understand. The build source is a set of classes and some code that is compiled when Gradle compiles our project. So that way we can use those classes to complement what we are doing in the Groovy files. What we can do there is to create an object that is saving the variables that then we are, well, in fact they are constants, the constants that we are going to use all around our Gradle files. And that way it's really easy to declare and then to use it on all our Gradle files. The other way, I don't even remember it because it's very convoluted and I've never used it in a real project, but this one is really simple. It's a bit more complicated to configure the first time, but once you have it, it's really easy to use. But we'll see it in a second. Now that this is about to finish, let's wait a little more and let's see how it goes. Okay, so right now we have the Gradle scripts written with Kotlin DSL and already compiling our project without issues. But we have made it simpler than it was before. So let's recover all those things that we have removed. And as I mentioned, the first one is the variables. We don't want to write this everywhere. if we can have a variable where we can change it in just one place. So to create the build source, we can create a directory here which will be called build source. Then here we need a build Gradle. No, sorry, this I'm going to do it manually better. File build Gradle KTS. And this file needs to identify a couple of things. The first one is to say that we are using the Kotlin DSL plugin. If I remember okay, I'll check it later in my cheat sheet, but this is something like this. We identify here that we are using Kotlin DSL. I think that something is wrong. Let me check it 1 second. No, it's okay like that. That way we are saying that the build source is going to use Kotlin DSL so that it can identify the Kotlin classes that we are creating here. And the second thing we need to do is to specify the repository where this plugin is going to be taken. So repositories JCenter. And that's it. With this, we can then create classes using this using Kotlin, that the classes or objects that we can then use in our Gradle files. So here we need to create the source structure, source main Java, the same as in the regular code. And here now we can create we can write Kotlin code. I'm going to call it versions.kt. And here I'm creating a very simple object called versions, which will have a constant support, which will be 2800 and the Kotlin version, which is 1.3.21. With this, let's make it sync, and we'll probably have to compile so that this class code is generated and we can use it in the Gradle scripts. Let's wait a little. And now this is regular Kotlin code, so we can use it in our Gradle files as the Kotlin you are probably used to already. Let's go here to the main build Gradle. Let's see if this finishes indexing and syncing. And the thing is that we are going to revert this. Here what we are using is In fact, it's very similar to what we had in Groovy, because Groovy already has this feature, which is the string templates. We are using it here too to recover the version from the versions object and use it instead of the hard-coded version here. Okay, this is taking a lot. It's still compiling the scripts, configuring project. But anyway, if you want, we can start writing it. It would be $ to identify that we are using a string template. Then the braces, because this is not a simple variable, but it's calling a property inside an object. So versions dot, I don't know if this will autocomplete already, probably not. No. So we can write it ourselves, versions.kotlin, and we can use the same in the other build Gradle. Here, the Kotlin standard library, we change it with versions.kotlin, and the compat version, versions.support. And the same here. And that should be it. When this all compiles, we can check that as this is Kotlin and this is a statically typed language, the compiler can the IDE is able to know what properties we had inside versions, and it will autocomplete without having us to remember all the names of these properties. This is one of the most helpful parts when compared to Ruby. But on the other hand, and at least in my experience, it's a bit slower, and you have to understand if you are calling to a function or a property to write it correctly. So it has its pros and its cons, of course. Okay, this is taking a lot. It keeps compiling. Well, and if you want, while this finishes, so that we are not all looking at the screen, we had a last thing we needed to change, which is this one, the task that we had here. The way to write them is a little bit different too, and we have to know it by heart. I didn't find a way to do it in a more direct way. So by looking through internet, I found that this must be written like this. This is a function task that receives the type of the task, which in our case is clean, and this part, the type delete, is not necessary. And then this delete code is the same. This is not a, we will have to know whether this is a property or a function, but given the name and the structure of this, we can almost be sure that this is going to be a function. So this should be it. In the comments, Javi commented that indexing is post, but I think this is done in purpose, because as Gradle is running, this is post by Android Studio until the Gradle task finishes. Okay, it seems I have an error here. Let's see. Yeah, this is because it's probably not detecting yet the build source. So let's do it here in the terminal. Maybe I have to revert that part so that it first compiles, but it shouldn't be necessary. But yeah, with this, we would have everything we need to convert our project from using Groovy scripts to using Kotlin DSL scripts. As you see, it's not very straightforward. You can follow these steps to make it easier, but you need some time and patience and keep compiling and check what is failing so that it can be done easier. I don't know if I have something wrong here. Let me check. Oh yeah, I see what it is. Here I'm missing this one. Let's see if that's all it's happening. And that will be it. Here in the build source, we could write all the code we need using regular Kotlin, and we could use it from the Gradle scripts in an easy way. For instance, apart from that, you could strat the complete libraries. If you have several modules, instead of writing it on each module, you can strat it there and use the variables from there and things like that. Even the versions, if you want to have it everything in a single place, you can also start the versions to those objects, and there you can do all the configuration and all the updates when a new version is released. Based on the time that it's taking, I'm almost sure that this is going to compile this time. But let's wait to be sure. So I mentioned before, even if it's slower, it's not that slow, it's that my computer is doing too many things. It's streaming, recording the video, it's compiling, so you can imagine that it's doing what it can to do all tasks at the same time. Okay. So yeah, let's just wait. I don't know, what do you think about it? To me, honestly, and I nowadays still prefer using Groovy because this is like a bit slow to me and also difficult to write. And in Groovy, unless you are doing very complex things, as we already know how to do the things, is not so difficult. But here with Kotlin DSL, I think they still have some things to polish so that it can be used in large projects. They already released the final version, so it's supposed to be ready to be used. So you shouldn't have any problems by using it on real projects. But to me, it's from what I tried, it looks like a bit dangerous to use in in real projects. So this finished finally, and it's compiling. It would be nice if we could see this compiling too in the IDE. I don't know if we will manage to do it. We probably need another sync because I wanted to show you how the autocomplete works for things like this. Okay, so let's try to remove this and write it again. I write version and do control space. This is working here. So you see here that we have our class versions, and we can do dot, and it should autocomplete with the two options we had, Kotlin and support. We're using support here. Nice, so that's what I wanted to show you. Sorry for the slow compilations, but I didn't have another way to do it, and this is really slow even without doing so many things, but even more in this situation. And I hope it clarified how you can convert your Groovy files from your Gradle files from Groovy to Kotlin DSL. It's not very straightforward, so with these steps I'm sure that it will make your tasks much easier. Thank you for being there, for the ones that were online, that watch it live, and also for the ones that are watching it from YouTube, the recording. Thanks, and see you soon in a new live video. As I mentioned in other videos, I'm doing this every week with different topics, from more from more beginners to more advanced topics, and so that you have some content from time to time to learn new things. Thank you again, and see you soon. Bye.